You are actually the most polite actress I have ever met in my life. Also, I want to tell you that I've learned so much from you on set, and I feel like in just 1 month of set, it was just like making like 5 years of drama, because you made me grow up so much, and I love you like crazy. Like crazy.
So much.
I love you, lady. I swear to God.
I'll give you the money for that later.
Yeah,
That was
thank
good.
you.
Good work. Good work.
It was 1,000.
Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. There's been so much going on, and I had to do a Sunday video because I got some exclusive tea for you guys about what went down behind the scenes on It Ends With Us, and why individuals who have worked with Justin in the past, as well as those who worked on the set, are stunned that this lawsuit has come this far because of the level of evidence that exists in this case. And I'm referring like mountains of evidence that Wayfarer and Justin have, and were extremely meticulous about documenting because of how hard Miss Blake was, and they knew that this could be coming, so to say that they're prepared is an understatement. And I want to just begin this off by saying, this comes from someone who used to work for Wayfarer for more than 4 years. She's a director and a producer, and her name is Christel Cornilsen, and she worked for Wayfarer for more than 4 years. She actually reached out to me on Instagram to provide me with her perspective on what it's like to work with Justin, what it's like to work with Jamie and the whole team behind Wayfarer, and she was one of the only women that worked on the set as far as like behind the camera as a director or producer, because there isn't going to be a lot of women producers or directors. She was one of the few women that worked at Wayfarer when she worked there behind the camera as either a director or a producer, so she didn't work on the set of this movie, but she has a great deal of experience with Justin and the Wayfarer crew, and then also another source that is affiliated with the production that I had a chance to chat with around what it was like to collaborate with Blake and how terrible it was for them. So I'd like to speak with you and begin this by discussing something that was posted back in August. And several individuals, I think Candace Owens, discovered this, and she brought it to the notice of people perhaps a few months ago. I want to start this here because what is in this post is actually reiterated to me by a separate source. And as far as this post, there was speculation, did it come from Jed Wallace? The answer is no, there was no smear campaign, so here is what the post said. It was posted back in August in the Colleen Hoover Reddit. I'm obviously using a throwaway, but I know someone who worked on the movie for most of its run who would have gotten these details piping hot. Not some grapevine situation, they told me firsthand what they know, and I'll give you bullet points. Supposedly, Blake felt that Justin made her uncomfortable on set. One instance in particular, they said, was that Justin told Blake she looked sexy in what she was wearing on set. I don't know the context around it. Apparently Justin wasn't happy with the original editor's cut of the movie, so he hired his own team to do his version of the movie. Blake wanted to do her own version of the movie as a result, but Sony said no. Blake goes to Sony and threatens to go to the New York Times with a story that says Justin was sexually harassing her on set. They don't let her have her own version. Sony freaks out and says, okay, whatever you want. Justin is banned from the Sony lot, I don't think forever, but for the run of the movie, but I could be wrong. Blake hires T Swift's music video editors to do her version. While she's filming in Italy for something, Blake has a friends and family screening to get thoughts with lots of A-listers. Ben Affleck, Bradley Cooper, I think, etc., etc. Everyone is like, this movie makes no effing sense. Blake realizes she needs to hire an experienced film editor to fix it. Blake uses a T Swift song in the movie that the studio loves having in there. T Swift finds out that the original composer for the movie is someone she worked with in the past that was mean to her, and she says it's either me or him. Sony fires the composer to keep the T Swift song. I think that's everything I know that went around Reddit, and people were like, oh, okay. You know, it was in the Colleen Hoover subreddit, and maybe unless you were someone that was inside Colleen's subreddit, you might have seen this at the time, but Candace Owens kind of put a spotlight on it a couple months ago, and I'm bringing this to you because what I was given is reminiscent of a lot of that, although the sources now are starting to put things together, and they believe that Taylor Swift, as far as like getting the composer fired, I don't think they think she had anything to do with that. And Justin doesn't state in his lawsuit that Taylor actually was involved in the composer getting fired, so that part, although it might have been said by Blake, was more than likely a lie. Okay, and then I wanted to share one other thing from a separate person on the subreddit team, Justin Baldoni. Woohoo, I love you guys. They said, I have no doubt Blake thought it was harassment, just they had a level of intimacy that they didn't, for example, calling her sexy. She didn't want to wear a costume that the costume designer had picked out. She would bring her own outfits from home and delay production for hours on this particular day. They were far behind. She put on something from home. He said something like, "I'm not sure, it looks a little frumpy." She got very offended, frumpy seeing he pissed her off, and now production was going to be delayed many more hours. He said, "No, it's great, you look sexy." And then she said, "Sexy? It's all stuff like that." She was looking at it through a lens. He thought they were closer than they were. Downvote away. I really don't care. And before you come at me, I agree. The PR woman texts were awful. Okay, so that was when the first lawsuit hit. Now we know from Justin's amended complaint that the sexy comment wasn't exactly as described in that. But again, I want to share this with you because this is stuff that's been out on Reddit, and this can be kind of used to like reiterate some of what I was told by my source. And then others was, oh, and one more. I just remember she undermined Justin all the time with directing. Sometimes she would stop the scene mid-shot and move his head so it was at a different angle. She was very demeaning with him. And basically tried to direct the movie herself, the friend said. The editor could really if they put together outtakes of various scenes where she was being insanely inappropriate on set. I sound like a Justin apologist. And I'm not, I just think PR is working both ways here. The New York Times article was clearly really biased, and another one was she held up production all the time with various things, a lot of the time upset about the wardrobe that she picked out, was constantly rewriting the script and refusing to do the script as written. The friend said that she was just totally unprofessional, then she demanded to recut the movie and made it worse. There were other things too. I'll go outside and see if my neighbor friend can remind me. The hate that she got was because of how she acted. All that being said, if it actually the shot happened, that's awful. Okay, so that again came out a couple months ago after the lawsuits were filed, but that was again someone that had a neighbor that was connected to the set. So there have been some individuals from the sets or that have been working on the set that have been speaking out and doing it in a public manner. And then there's been a lot of these like leaks through Reddit. And I'll say like the individual that I interviewed was not willing to go on record and was actually very careful about giving information because they don't want it to get attached back to them in any manner. And I get it why, because this is how I understood what took place here. And the manner in which it was explained to me is that what Blake did is that by going through the process of the film, and she essentially tried to remove all of Wayfarer and put her own individuals into the movie. Okay, and so some of the individuals that were from Wayfarer, some of them were able to still employed and others got fired straight. And those who were still worked and still maintained a close proximity to her, they don't wish to be exposed because she's supposedly a malignant narcissist. That is what I was informed, so I posted on my Instagram and I published some of their information, and I'll sort of like summarize some of the things which I stated and attempt to give you a little bit more background text. Okay, so here were some of the bullet points from the source from the set. Said Blake Lively was a nightmare on set, and she absolutely is a malignant narcissist. So one thing they made a point of saying was that Blake is an unreliable narrator. She says that in the movie. But it's true. It's hard to know when working with her what she says is true or not because she lies so as much and you catch her in the lie. And then as soon as you catch her in the lie, she's lying about something else. And they kind of said it was like pathological in the lying, so it makes it difficult for people to distinguish like what's real from what's reality when it comes to her. And because she employs lies as a method of manipulation, that it's highly difficult for people to get along with her because she just plain invents things. And so anything that you do with her might end up being her using it against you in some form, which makes it pretty awkward for people to be around her. The other thing was there was no sexual harassment, and they were insistent about that. They said, that the cameras never stopped rolling between takes. Often scenes were shot several times because Blake didn't like something during scenes. Videos demonstrate Blake attempting to steer Belden and hijack the set today. If you recall those other posts I just demonstrated, that is exactly what she did, like where they were stating she would like stop and like move his face and attempt to speak through him and attempt to steer him. And the way I was told it is that there are hours and hours and hours and hours of footage, raw footage from the shoot of this film. And so you have the cameras never cut, meaning the cameras stayed on and then they just keep it on in between takes so that they don't have to get everything, warmed up again, right? So she doesn't recognize or maybe understand that a lot of the fighting that was happening between her and Baldoni is all recorded on camera. And so when Brian Friedman says that he's sure about her, and that Justin is keeping something back due to how humiliating it would be for her, they said that it's true. Like they stated that if this goes to trial, it will be extremely bad for Blake, because the jury can see the manner in which she treated Balan and the personnel on the set. They'll see her being argumentative, inappropriate, condescending, patronizing, rude, arguing, not following instructions, and making things last way longer than they had to. And it was apparent that she wanted control of the entirety of it, and that this idea that Justin had any say over her, they called it nonsense. And the old Wayfarer employee that I talked to that worked with him for years told me that Justin is the most harmless individual you'll ever meet, that the men at Wayfarer, they're all really into their religion, but they don't press it on anybody. But they're very harmonious, they're very respectful, and the way that she explained it was like they are very straight-laced, and so he would never hit on another woman because he's married and he's like committed to his wife, and that's very important to him, and he's very aware of like that line. So this idea that he would cross a boundary with her, they said no way. They said like the way that it was explained about things he would have said, or discussions that would have had them, said no way. Blake is a very controlling and domineering woman, and he's a little bit more passive and conciliatory. They said like he wants to please everybody. So they said harmless, absolutely harmless kind, considerate, positive, very positive individuals, and really take people's like criticism to heart. And she said that this has been disastrous for Justin, like he's destroyed, totally destroyed, and his entire family is just devastated by all of this. That gets to this extent, Blake belittled and patronized individuals and would constantly ridicule innocuous things, which she thought was hysterical. She's out of touch with reality. So I think a decent point would be like when Justin presented the dancing scene and she's alleging sexual harassment occurred while that scene. But then in that same scene, she teases his nose and says he needs to get a nose job and to take like a healthcare or, a doctor month or something, insurance month, and fix his nose. So those are the types of things that like she would call out to people. She's really very much a Nepo baby. That's how it was explained to me. She doesn't exist in reality. Like she exists in a world where she's had everyone from a very young age tell her that she's great and she's perfect and she's like the next big thing, and that she should be able to have things and be given things, and it's her right to have things. And then she's also so disconnected from the real world. Little things that we would take for granted, she finds hysterical because she's never ever seen these things before. She generally has an air of herself that she's better than people, and she's not afraid to minimize and belittle people. And she from the jump very much was like that from day one on the set with them. That's what I was told, and there's documented evidence of that. She could not accept her role as actress and woke up fighting with Justin. I think I told that it's all on tape and it won't reflect well on her. The insider continues, Blake is a fool to bring this to a jury because she will come across awful. Yeah, no need for explanation here. There is not a single clip of Blake ever declaring that she was harassed or reporting to anyone that she ever felt ill at ease. It's actually the opposite. Individuals on set had to instruct Blake to take direction and shut up interfering, so she was the difficult one to deal with on the set. She arrived late, she went over budgets, she took sick leave, she would change what she wished to do on the set, she altered what her lines were, she altered what she was wearing. It was like anything she desired she received. I inquired, I said, I still cannot comprehend why she did this. I don't know why she did this film, it doesn't make sense to me. And their gut feeling was due to the manner in which she used Taylor through the movie, and used her close proximity to Ryan, and perception that only Ryan is the good one, like Ryan's the only one that can produce good movies, and so we need to introduce Ryan's team, because Ryan's team will improve. It does things that make sense, such as she thinks that this movie's all right, but with Ryan it would be like 100 times greater. That was sort of the sense that I got from what they were saying, and they said that because her best friend Taylor is like a bona fide superstar, and likely the most well-known celebrity in the world right now, and her husband is also just as influential. They feel that she witnessed this opportunity and she realized that she could insert herself through the incessant threats and spurious charges of sexual harassment to obtain what she wished. So that she might be on their level, they really believed that it was about her believing that this was going to be her moment, where it's going to be my movie. I'm going to seize this on. I'm going to be that next thing. I'll be as good as, Taylor. I'll be as good as my husband. I will not be in their shadows anymore. That's kind of how they thought of her and her wanting it. And she would, because she wanted it so badly. I was willing to go to any length to get it, which included constant threats and constant belittling and disruptions and the false sexual harassment claims. She was a nightmare. If it's not that she threatened to go to the New York Times and accuse Balan of SH if she did not receive the final edit, and Sony caved in order to save the movie. So one of the questions I posed, and many of you guys have been asking, is why did Sony continue to cave? Why did they continue to give in to her? And this is what I was told, and much of this is in the timeline of pertinent events if you sift through his timeline of pertinent events. But along the way, during that process, Blake hadn't signed the contract yet. Blake was using her relationship with Taylor to attempt to get Taylor's music included. She fired the composer and lied and said that Taylor was why the composer got fired. She fired them because if she brought in her own composer, then she'd be qualified to receive the PGA credit, because part of being a producer is also doing the musical end of it and directing, because it's two different things, and edit, so she could go ahead and apply then for the PGA credit. But she lied and had the composer fired because she used Taylor as the reason she was doing it. And that's point 8 that I included here. And so, when you speak about the music in this movie, when Taylor issued a public statement, and she was like, I was part of 19 people who licensed music, there was no soundtrack for this movie. Every film typically has music in the background, and it's not words or songs, because songs sort of detract from the gravity of the dialogue. And you receive a song that contains words in it, and then you have dialogue with words, and it creates an incompatible listening and audio experience. And so often the underscore or the overcore or whatever the music is usually instrumental, and the original score was going to be instrumental and more like orchestral, because they wanted to not get away from the seriousness of the topic, and they wanted to stay away from the poppy music, because they felt it would sort of reduce the amount of the content of the film and make it seem less severe. So the reason why they use so many songs is because the composer whom she did hire never completed a real score. So instead, all of the music is licensed music which has lyrics, and because they had so much licensed music, they had to use so much of the licensed music in the film. So you saw so many montages, and music was inserted in areas where it didn't fit, and that's why the music of the movie is so awkward, and as far as how she was depicted in the fact of how she was desirous to dominate the film. And in this, Blake's not a bright person. I guess she's super manipulative, and she's super scheming, and she schemes and she lies. But as far as knowing how to do a lot of things, she didn't know how, and so she was just kind of described as very manic giving orders to people. She had no clear idea of what she wanted. She had no idea about the film itself, because she doesn't know how to edit. She doesn't understand how to direct. She doesn't understand how to produce it, made just chaos, and she was so not to individuals due to that, such as she would have all these concepts regarding what she thought she desired, but none of it actually would hold sense assembled all together. And when it came to the eventual cuts of the movie, the one thing that, in the timeline of pertinent events, you hear about how she did a cut and it scored extremely badly, and she did it for her friends and family video. In that post I showed you, it said people viewed the cut and they were like, what, this doesn't make sense. That's what I was informed, her cut, prior to the fact that she was compelled to insert most of Justin's cut into hers. Her movie was not watchable, did not make sense to folks at all when they saw it. They could not view what had occurred, and they did not know what they were. It was just unwatchable, the movie. If it would have been released as is, would have, or it tanked the film because of that, she was forced by Sony to add in a good portion of Justin's scenes to make sure that they profited on the film, but this was completed, and then she did her second screening where she had to add back all that stuff because it was so unwatchable, and after the second screening she still did low, and so her cut wasn't going to be released, it was going to be Justin's cut. And so, because she lost, Then that's when she took over the Book Bonanza stuff, and I guess when she was talking in Book Bonanza about, her cut and she brought it on a plane and all of that, it was never they were always going to show a segment of the movie, but they were also going to screen Justin's cut at Book Bonanza. And what did they do was that she overrode them and said, "We're showing my cut." And that was deliberately done, so that once people had seen her cut, and that was what the fans had seen, he couldn't get his cut reinstated because those fans had already seen it. It was a means for her to cemented that her cut was the one that came out. It's diabolical if you consider it. I asked, the lady who worked with Wayfarer, and she said that Justin has always had excellent casting in all of his documentaries and all of his movies that he's produced. He's had fantastic casting and casting directors who have worked to cast all of the movies that he's produced. When it came to this, he was with WME on board when the casting director conducted an interview, and then this sort of aligns with what this individual was telling me, but they feel that Blake was added because he was represented by William Morris Endeavor at the time, which is the talent agency, and so was Blake. Sony had specific individuals they worked with, but due to Justin's rep and his rep by WME, they were going to look for another WME actress for her part. Okay, for Lily. And so they had a short list based on that of who's represented by them, and then they wanted an established actress. They didn't want someone that was going to be totally new for this part, because they needed someone that could, center a whole movie. You need to have a draw for the film, and she was cast, and initially at that time, yes, there was talk of the characters being aged up, but really that entire aged up process got altered due to her casting, because nothing in the script really aligned with that. The characters were actually aged up outside of the characters were older, and that Ryla had his own apartment and a penthouse. The entire film, that was it. Everything else was essentially the same, and Riley wasn't a resident, he was a neurosurgeon full-blown. But those honestly could have been very easy changes in the movie. We don't actually know if they did end up doing the age up for this, but they said having known Justin, they kind of speculated that Sony most likely wanted Blake and WME most likely wanted Blake because it was going to be like her comeback film, and they need to get her in work. It was like, okay, so Blake is going to be your Lily. And he basically just rolled with it and placated them, even though he may not have wished for it. And they stated that what they do know of Justin, had it been him, his own will, he likely would not have cast Blake Lively due to just her general reputation within the field. And if you pay attention to the timeline of pertinent information, they did state that they cast her even though they were worried about her reputation, and how that the former employee said is, there's probably a lot of pressure put on him to cast her because of his WME the agent's Sony, and the casting director being like, this is your person. A lot goes on behind the scene. WME has apparently lots of control, and that's a whole another conversation for another day. Jenny Slate is also with WME, Brandon Solinar is now with WME. So you have a lot of WME cast in the film, and that's not accidental. Blake was manic. Blake was horrible, her cut of the film was terrible. As released, the film was not complete because the score was not done. Even what's out in the theaters, it's an incomplete score to this day. And so when they actually do speak about the damage that she caused to this movie, the evidence is in what was shown. That was the best they could obtain it to get out. That was the best they could do. And it was not what he wanted, and it was not what Wayfarer wanted, and it surely totally transformed it. And from the manner in which it was presented to me is that this film might have done so much better. It did quite well at the box office, but it might have done so much better. It would have and might have received better reviews if it had been made with Justin and Wayfarer and their vision, because it would have been more together. I did ask, for the director's cut and the differences and but they didn't know. No one knows. No one knows. I guess I'm not shocked. What do you think? Are you shocked to learn of this? I know the ex-employee stated that it is quite terrifying for individuals to take on WME because they wield so much influence in Hollywood, and that when a person is at a level like Ryan and Blake at WME, they are basically the dominant factor of WME now, because some of the most high-profile celebrities that they have, a lot of the reasons why you're witnessing people not speaking out against them and the media platting to them is that there's fear within the industry of bucking the PR machine. that is WME, because the manner in which that the people whom I've spoken to have characterized it is that WME uses bots for their people. They use fake accounts for the followers, they increase follower totals, they utilize bot accounts, and they even feel that WME does some astroturfing themselves. That was the claim. So they believe that's why Blake is putting this on Justin, because it's what WME seemingly does, oversaturating, altering stories, attempting to make things seem larger than they are. They mentioned that there is so much manipulation going on behind the scenes to make celebrities seem larger than they actually are. They mentioned that if you likely scanned Blake's followers on Instagram, there is no way that she actually has 47 million followers. Lots of them, they said, are most likely bogus. And they do that, they pad numbers for lots of the people. So there's a lot of smoke and mirrors in Hollywood. And finally, once again, absolutely no sexual harassment. Blake will be embarrassed if this goes to the jury because of all of the video that they have, and nobody can believe she has gone so far with it, because there's no evidence, and there's mountains of evidence and papers to refute at all. And that's why Brian Friedman is so certain, and he's not perspiring any of what is occurring with the lively parties at the moment. They know they will win, and that Blake will be just ruined if this goes to trial. So what do you think? Tell me in the comments below. Ensure to give this video a thumbs up. Ensure to subscribe to my channel if you haven't subscribed, and hit the bell so you never miss a video. Thanks so much for watching. Bye, guys.